all the trees regarding our gender identity and sexuality. When there's no place like home, empty air, an empty establishment. Friends with Dorothy, fighting for your civil rights. Out on the cruel streets tonight.
Hi, and welcome to Mick Pitt's LGBTQ plus Life, Ireland's favourite LGBTQ plus programme for, by and about the LGBTQ plus community.
We are delighted to welcome a first-time guest today. Not only that, but a playwright as well, coming to us, Ella Skolimowski.
Great, thank you very much, mate. Thank you for inviting me to be on the show.
You and I, we first encountered each other. I like that term. At the launch of the Gay Theatre Festival, and this year you're taking part in the Scene+Heard Festival as well. This is Ireland, and you come from London, so you tend to have 6 degrees of separation. No, in Ireland, we're 3 degrees of separation.
Yes,
and in our case, it's actually 1 in both instances, because you know Brian Merriman, I know Brian Merriman, you know Caoimhe Connolly, I know Caoimhe Connolly. So that's Ireland for you.
It is, yeah. The theatre and the creative scenes are very small, but I really like that you keep crossing paths with people and building those connections. It's exciting.
Well, you know, theatre is in Dublin particularly. I don't know about the rest of Ireland, but Dublin has a very rich theatre heritage, and there's one reason for that, is that when I was growing up here, and long before that, cinema was always censored, but theatre wasn't.
Right.
So as a result, priests could go to theatre, but so. Dublin particularly had a very rich theatre heritage because of that, because particularly when we were under the British, the Lord Chamberlain didn't ban theatre here. Yeah. So isn't that interesting?
That's amazing. Okay, so we actually have this legacy here of doing slightly controversial things in the space of theatre. That's
exactly. Well, I don't know if you ever came across I think it might have been Juno and the Paycock when Sean O'Casey, whose real name was Jack Cassidy anyway, performed at the original Abbey Theatre. Oh, there were riots almost, because they thought this is so anti-Irish, and well, he was, dare I say it, one of our separated brethren.
Yes.
Yeah. So is that something that you feel you could build on? Because it's, as I say, it's a rich soil here for playwrights.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, Mick. And the scene is so lively and it's so diverse. There are people talking about all kinds of different topics, and I've certainly in the pieces that I know you and I have talked about that I've produced in the past, you know, I've done one that was about the kind of experience of being non-binary, which was the piece I had on at the Gay Theatre Festival last year, and then I've done another one about kind of amateur pornography creators and the digital space. And I've always been always had that little bit of anxiety about how our audience is going to receive this and what are people going to say about this subject matter. But no, like the appetite is there, and people are so generous and curious about these themes and subjects that you might think are challenging. It's great.
Yeah. I'm more familiar with your environment than you possibly are with mine, but I lived in London for at least 10 years. Many of my family were there. And we always found the British were a bit reserved. In other words, they could go a bit crazy from time to time, but we have crazy as our default position. Is that something that you encountered here, and is that something you would perhaps find refreshing?
That's definitely, it hadn't occurred to me before, but that's definitely a cultural difference that I find myself kind of self-censoring sometimes in my writing, and there's absolutely no need to do it. There's no expectation.
No, we don't. It's not even so much that we love to we love to express ourselves, because dare I say it, since you're going to be hearing a bit about him, but one of my family is associated, well, they're related to Brendan Behan. And Brendan probably wouldn't have got his plays produced in Britain if he was British.
Yeah.
He did, he did make his breakthrough there. Yeah. Whereas here, we all love Brendan, even though we didn't want to be Brendan, we all loved him. And Brendan, then he became Brendan squared, just to play into that persona.
Yes, that makes sense. That does. That does. Finding the audience.
So let's get a bit psychological and do the Freud. Why'd you come to Ireland?
This was a response to Brexit, and
was it?
This is actually the subject of another theatre project I'll be doing in the spring. I want to do a piece looking at Brexit as a prompt for migration, and I really want to look at maybe Irish people who've returned to Ireland as a result of the Brexit vote, or people like me who would have had generational links to Ireland who realised they've got an opportunity to continue living in the EU, and that seems like a better deal. So I'd really like to get a sense of these people's views about Brexit and how it's informing their identity. Like, you'll know yourself, Mick, that after the Brexit vote, there was a massive uptick in British-born people going and getting their Irish passports. So what does that mean, and what is their relationship to Ireland, and does it challenge what we think about Irishness? So many interesting questions coming out of that.
Dare I say it, you perhaps could have probably tapped into a Polish heritage as well.
Well, potentially I could, but there's a lot more going on that side of the family, with borders being a bit more elastic, and you have to have a really strong sense of the Polish language to apply for citizenship there, which, when they migrated to Britain, that was totally lost. So
an interesting one. Again, I don't want to digress too much from the work we're going to talk about, but Poland and Ireland, to a certain degree, had a similar cultural, albeit parallel backdrop to the Catholic Church.
Yes.
Once we got our freedom, dare I say it, we really did. It took a while, but we came to terms with that Catholic Church heritage.
Yes.
And particularly in the last, say, 10, 15 years, we brought up an alternative to it. Poland seems to have gone the opposite. We're going really Catholic, so you can't have abortion. We're not very keen on gay people and all of that. And I find that a response to liberty. Rather than anything else. And liberty, to me, is something you have to embrace, and it means taking responsibility for yourself and your actions and your environment. How does that go down with somebody like yourself?
Well, I think really there's a kind of trend amongst media at the moment to look for evidence of emerging right-wing movements, and I think if you look hard enough for it, you'll find it, and if you cover it enough, you'll perpetuate them. I just had a conversation earlier this week about whether something like that might be happening in Dublin right now, and I'm not going to talk about the issue because I don't want to give it any more. I think we're all just so I think horrified by the emergence of reactionary politics that we're giving it a lot of attention, and that's what it craves. So
well, I find, and again, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I've got a friend, I've got an acquaintance, and he used to be in the official IRA, which were Marxist and Leninist and all of that stuff. And now he's suddenly gone over to this right-wing anti-immigrant. But again, and it's very interesting, I find, is that they're all, if you just scratch the surface, what you find is Catholicism. In other words, I want to hand over my responsibility to somebody else. And it tends to inform on what I'm saying. Whereas I've never wanted that. I've never wanted somebody else to define my identity for me, and I suspect you're a bit the same.
I am, but that really resonated with the kind of struggle of the character I have in this piece that's going on at Smock Alley on the 19th, which is about someone who's come into a kind of addiction recovery program, and part of that is, will you identify a higher power? And it is about from her point of view, she has a desire to absolve herself of responsibility, and she's looking for some rules and some structure.
That's interesting, isn't it? In other words, we'll come back to that one. Tell me, writing plays. Did you? I was an avid reader of plays when I was a teenager. I loved reading plays. Were you the same? I used to go down to the library and I'd find out plays. Initially, I preferred, I loved The Bard. And then later on in life, the one that really blew me away was Tennessee Williams. To me, he's the greatest playwright of the 20th century, but that's me. But were you a bit like that as well, or how did you come to enjoying and loving plays?
Well, I probably came into it through the performance side. So I would have acted a lot when I was younger and really enjoyed engaging with plays from that perspective. And then, later on, life goes on and you are looking for new creative outlets, especially if you're in I was in a corporate environment at the time that I
have too as well. So
yeah, exactly. So, and I wanted, a creative outlet, and there was just something, I've always loved theatre. There's something about it that really strongly appeals to me, and I'm totally with you on the writing plays and reading plays, which might be because I've got commitment issues. Like I would never be able to sit down and get into one of these TV series that goes on for 18 seasons, but an hour of theatre, you can read that really, really quickly, can't you?
Funny you should mention that, because I'm not either, but what we tend to do, we tend to get them all at once and then look at them all at once. So I hate watching something week after week. So Last Tango in Halifax, I've just finished. 5 seasons of it in a week. Absolutely fabulous.
That's a real marathon.
No, it's not. That's standard now. But no. And then the Brits do great stuff like that. I mean, we watched another one called Slow Horses. I don't know if you've seen that. Gary Oldman. Again, magnificent. It's only 2 seasons, but fabulous. So anyway, that's beside the point. You at the moment, are you, because you're, shall we say, didn't grow up here, you don't necessarily have what we would call those Masonic connections to theatre. Are you finding it easy to break into that environment, or that milieu, as I like to refer to it?
That's a very challenging question you've asked me. I think that, the scene is really supportive and friendly. It's very easy to begin playwriting and get your work to the stage. There are lots of opportunities. There are places like the New Theatre, there's Scene+Heard, which I'm doing this year. Even the Gay Festival is a great place to cut teeth. The question about how you progress after that is slightly more complicated, because there are all kinds of issues around funding and commercialization that you run into.
Did you know that everybody in the Irish theatre has the same first name? They're all called Grant. Isn't it true? I mean, nobody cares about making money. We don't care about making a profit. We just want to get funding. That's the radio isn't a million miles different either.
I know.
Yeah. On that basis, have you ever considered writing radio plays?
Well, I have. I did write a script for an audio drama, which was called Lovesick, and it did get nominated for an Imerson Award, which is one of the audio drama awards in the UK. And there was a very nice awards ceremony at the BBC, which I missed out on going to because of COVID. But yeah, so I love writing for audio. I feel very at home there because I like words, I like dialogue, I like thinking about how you can build worlds and evoke moods with sound. So I love it. But, I've had no opportunities to do it recently. So if anyone wants to give me a commission to do it, anyone listening?
Hold on. Can I give you the magic words? Sound and vision.
Sound and vision.
Sound and vision is a scheme that's promoted by the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland. They would give funding for you to produce a radio play. And to show you now, I know they've cut back, but I worked for a radio station which will remain anonymous. But the person who established that radio station, he put in one of his own plays that would be performed by his radio station. He got 65 grand for that.
Gosh, that's so
I know.
awful.
I mean, and there were so few listeners. I used to make a joke. We could have hired the Abbey and brought all the listeners in taxis and taken them home, and we still would have come out. So, sound and vision. If you need any more, come to me afterwards, and we'll talk about it. But
marvelous, thank you, Mick. I'll look that
so
up.
that's look. That's the way I've changed since I was a hippie. I don't like capitalism, but it upholds my civil rights. So that's where I mean. So let's talk about Seen and Heard. You've got a play in that.
Yes.
And this has been performed, unlike the last one, which was called Porn, great title, very catchy. This has been performed. Is this much more of a challenge, and how do you go about that? Because there you have to have sets, you have to have all the paraphernalia and infrastructure that goes with it. Has that been much more of a challenge? Because the last time it was mainly a reading, wasn't it? Yes.
The last time I was in, I think that was the Gay Theatre Festival. That was a reading, so it was very stripped back. And this production is also quite minimalist because Seen and Heard is really about getting something on the stage for the first time. So it does have that slightly kind of that energy, that kind of do-it-yourself energy, which I really, really like and thrive on for that festival. But yeah, this is a full-length piece of theatre. So my show is an hour long. It's really my first kind of full-length piece of writing. So there is a lot more to consider, and there's a lot more to do technically, and it's a lot more demanding for the performers, certainly. Yeah.
You've got a very short and snappy blurb for this, and it's I found it interesting because you talk about, well, this is somebody who has self-perceived deficiencies. One, I think, was a dodgy eye. Another one was chlamydia. But yet you're going to make a great date. Now, I'll come to that in a second, because I'm, God knows how old, but I've never been on a date in my life. Never once. I've had a lot of engagements, but I've never been on a date, because to me, it's too structured and too straight a way of meeting. And
right.
The bit I found really interesting was at the end of it, when I talked to various people. I was on a date last night, but there was no chemistry. Yes. And I usually, the way I tend to look at that is that maybe there was no chemicals. And that's probably why I've never needed to go on a date.
I see.
Yeah. So you have to start, you don't, when you meet people, you enjoy their company or you don't. And you don't meet them a second time unless it's, in a, shall we say, in a corporate environment. But when you meet people you like a second time, it's usually, what can we do to enjoy ourselves and share?
Yes.
So that's why that whole structure of dates never worked for me. Well, it never arose. And I've also never had a Valentine's card. Can you believe that? Even the ones I sent myself never arrived.
that in itself is interesting, that there's people put so much store by that. Like, I must have seen Valentine's cards appearing in the shops in January here, which I found really alarming and horrifying. It's just a different culture. I think the what you're outlining there about how people used to meet organically, and if you liked their company, you'd try and see them again, and that world doesn't exist anymore. It is now people meeting online with a very definite agenda that they're coming into that interaction with, and they want answers really fast about whether things are going to go anywhere or not.
It's interesting again. Of my generation, I don't know anybody who's been on an internet date. Of your generation, I don't know anybody who hasn't. And it's an interesting one, isn't it?
It is.
So a second one I've also found about your generation, and I see you as an individual, Ella, so don't worry about that, is that they're brilliant at finding information and absolutely crap at analyzing that information, or as I would call it, decoding that information. And that's probably why dates fail.
Yes, I think so. I think that's a big part of it. But also I think people can often put themselves on something like a dating app without the intention of finding a relationship. And I don't mean just because they're out for the, the one night encounter. I mean,
Yeah.
actually, people can do it for entertainment, out of boredom, for validation, for all kinds of reasons that are nothing to do with finding some kind of connection with another human being. So you just don't know what you're up against.
Well, to a certain degree, getting into a relationship is the easy part. Making it work is the hard part.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I'm not talking about your parents and my parents. They didn't have a choice.
Yes.
My generation does, because we have divorce now, which was do you think people are going to find it easier or more difficult to do that? Of people coming through in your generation, does the internet give you an out?
That's such a good question. I don't have an immediate kind of response to that one, Mick. I don't know. I think the character I'm looking at in my play, her big problem is actually exiting relationships. I think might be a little bit of autobiography in there, but let's not poke at that one too much. But finding it easy to get into them, certainly. Very, very easy. Yeah. Then getting through the struggle. And then when you get to the struggle, the question is, should I be struggling? Am I struggling in a way that's detrimental to me? Should I be doing the work, or do I need to exit? That's the kind of question that she's grappling with. And I think that is a question a lot of people grapple with now. Absolutely.
Well, that's an interesting observation, because in a relationship, both parties change.
Yes.
Now you either grow closer or you grow further apart. And how you manage that transition is the interesting one. Now, I've been saying it to, being the old seer these days, I say to people, relationships work if both parties want it to work. And if one doesn't, that's it. So exiting, don't worry about the exiting. We all get around to that one. But I also have a friend who just got married, and he's 40 years of age now, very, very much in showbiz. And I said to him a couple of years ago, you have to start a new relationship every day with the person. And that's the real challenge, because that requires a bit of effort and a bit of thinking. So there's a bit of food for thought for you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really interesting one. But if you... on the other side of that, if you felt like you were starting a new relationship every day, does that also mean you have to apply the same kind of scrutiny you would to a new partner?
No, you have to apply it to
the other way too.
No, well, perhaps, but you also have to apply it to yourself. And that's much more. In other words, we have to become essentially first date all over again every day. And I know that sounds like Groundhog Day, but it's I've had more failed relationships than you've probably had hot dinners. So I don't want to, but you hopefully learn from them. Hopefully, yeah. And as I say, I think an interesting one, particularly, it's for both genders. Nobody wants to die alone and old and sad. It's isn't it true?
I think that there is a real grain of truth in that. There is, Really
so why did you give up the acting?
Well, did I give it up? Did I give it up?
Yeah,
there's still a career ahead of me. I don't know. I mean, I'm taking one of the roles in this piece that I've got on the 19th.
Very good. Yeah. Okay. Well, now, Seen and Heard, we go back a bit, because going to those 1 degrees of separation, Caoimhe Connolly, I know very well. I haven't seen Caoimhe for a while, but there are specific reasons for that. We've never had a falling out. I've always liked Caoimhe. I mean, she's one of those. Like myself, she's got a bit of the madness, but knows how to channel it. She's better at channeling it than I am, and that's why I like Caoimhe. She's an individual.
She gets an awful lot done. Yeah.
Well, she's, as I say, Caoimhe is not everybody's cup of tea, but she is mine, and I make no bones about that. I like Caoimhe. So, how did you get involved with Seen and Heard then? I presume this is your first outing of Seen and Heard.
No, it is my 3rd time doing the Seen and Heard. So I did my first one 2019, and that was when I was beginning to do early experiments with playwriting. Did Seen and Heard, thought this is fabulous, such a great festival, great atmosphere, you get to meet so many people, I'm on my way. And then the world changed.
It did, didn't it?
And there wasn't a Scene and Heard the year after that. So, but I did
Yeah.
come back in subsequent years. So no, I just love that festival. I love the energy of it.
Yeah, I'll have to have a word with Queen about this because I'm a bit disappointed. She's only given you one day. I mean, other plays I've gone and seen, they've had an entire week. Was that a scheduling issue, or what was the criteria there?
No, that's standard. If you are doing an hour-long piece, you get one performance. If you're doing a shorter piece and you're sharing with another show, then you get 2 performances of that. So it all kind of evens out in the end.
Yeah, but now you know what to do next year. 30 minutes, and you get a week. Because I went. I like to promote Scene and Heard, and I particularly like to promote emerging talent because it's so much more rewarding for somebody like myself. So on that basis, then, let people know, when is it on, and how can they got to come and see it?
It's on at the 19th of February, 1:00 at Smock Alley.
That's a Sunday, isn't it?
It is a Sunday. It's a Sunday afternoon. So it's exactly what you want after you've been to church in the morning. You want to come and listen to something about 12 steps and addiction and God and love and all of that.
Okay. I haven't come to this one as well. A subject I'm not entirely unfamiliar with, we'll call addiction. And to me, addiction is a form of OCD. It's a form. Basically, it's repetitive behavior.
Compulsive
compulsion.
Behavior.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll be honest. This whole idea of going to therapy and all of that, again, I've never done it. But I've probably given up more things than most people have ever started. And I wonder again, is that, going back to the beginning of what we talked about, is that somebody giving over their liberty to somebody else, in this case, a guy with a piece of paper?
I think from the perspective of the character that I'm presenting, I think that is exactly what's happening. She is someone who has come into addiction therapy after having been in an abusive relationship.
Sure,
so she is looking for structures and rules to make sure that she doesn't end up with this guy again, right? Because there is a compulsive attraction to him. So the framework, and actually, sex and love addiction groups are useful frameworks for people in that situation because they have to answer the question, like all addicts do, why did I engage with something that was bad for my well-being, right? So she's in the same position as other people in her group. And it's possibly, I think, for this character, it would be more helpful to her if she was going to engage in it more honestly. Because obviously this is a comedy, you know how I write things.
Of course,
so she's sardonic, she's cynical, she's wry about it. Maybe if she actually committed, she would get something out of it. But as it stands, it's a prop for her, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, to a certain degree, I wonder, do you have to admit to the issue, as I probably have myself? Why did I do this? Because I liked it. I enjoyed it. And yes, sometimes it does. But along the way, it's all, I hate the term, but it's all a bit of a journey. And at the end of it all, like Bill Hicks says, it's just a merry-go-round. You can get off at any time. And that's, to me, the great therapist was Bill Hicks. I thought he was just unbelievable as a comedian because he told about life as it was.
Yes.
And it worked. Well, okay, he died from cancer, but that's, the point he raises, and it's a very funny piece. He says, why do you never hear positive drug stories on the radio, on the news? You only hear negative ones. And that's, again, I think, is probably the Matrix hitting back at you. He said, come out to our house. We've always had a great time. Look at it. And that's the difference, isn't it? The outside world we see is often in direct contradiction to the inner world.
That's it. Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Anyway, I'm looking to go forward to going and seeing it. So I think it's wonderful that we're getting new talent coming through, fresh ideas coming through, fresh ways of looking at the world. Because there's nothing new under the sun; it's all been created before. But you can bring freshness to it.
Perspective,
isn't it? Yeah, that's perspective, and I think you come here with a fresh perspective, and that has got to be great for the transference of culture. That's how we grow, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
Ella, just to let people know, the play is called Normal Turmoil. Now, there is no, shall we say, there is no homage to Sally Rooney in that. And the last thing I want to ask you is, how did you get Harry Styles to play in the play? Because
I will pass on to him that you think he looks like Harry Styles.
He does a bit look like Harry Styles.
To say that this week, I think he'll be very good.
He's a very good look. You know, I mean, given the choice, I probably wouldn't jump over you to get to him, but he's a good-looking boy, I have to say that, and he does have a certain resemblance to One Dimension, as I like to refer to them. Yeah. So, Ella, it's been a joy having you here today, and I apologise for not having you here yesterday, but it has been a joy. And look, as we say in theatre, break a leg.
Thank you so much, Mick.
And sadly, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of Mick Pitt's LGBTQ Plus Life. I'll be back in a week's time with more guests and more news that's happening in your part of the world. As we say, stay safe, stay fabulous.
Friends with Dorothy come out off the sidewalk and onto the street to the sound of those legendary feet. Like home, anti-him, anti-establishment. With the chaff and the short straw, they'll have a stuff for sure. Anti-him, I'm anti-establishment. Like home.